This is Moreh Shawn Appleton and
Moreh Robert B. Holman Jr.
And this is Hebrews in Exile.
Shalom to
Shalom.
everybody.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. We are in the middle of the High Holy Days. And around the world where the High Holy Days are celebrated, there are differences of opinion and thought as to when they occur. We have come full circle in our origin of being Hebraic, and for a number of years we followed the calendar that was established and is held by the Ashkenazis and the world, because the world follows whatever the Ashkenazis say. That's what's on the world calendars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And studious study has helped us to understand that there is what their basis of generating their times and seasons are on. And the thing is that there is a distinct difference of the evolution of the Hebrew man versus the Jewish man.
True.
Being Hebraic, it has caused us to do research and do study to arrive at the elements that are true by the evidence of Scripture and by the evidence of going outside of the Catholic canonized works to explore other books that are a part of the Hebrew people.
Mm-hmm.
History records that the European nations, such as Greece and Rome, with their establishment of their Christian theology, destroyed a plethora of Hebrew writings. But the Most High has left us a word in His Word where He says, I have never left myself without a witness. In the book of Proverbs, it writes, it's the glory of Yah to conceal a matter, the honor of kings to search it out. And being diligent with Scripture and being diligent with asking questions and not just taking the company line, and being Hebraic, and also being diligent and asking the Most High to reveal to us truth, we have uncovered some things that other people of our belief system haven't uncovered and refuse to even investigate and look into.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
But once again, I'm going to say these words. A house is still a house, whether it's built with wood and stucco or whether it's built with iron and steel. The framework is still a house.
Yep.
The contributing factors of the house is dependent upon what you put into the house that makes the house really solid in its complete structure and able to withstand whatever elements come against it. I'm using that terminology to say that when you build something that's based upon the words of the Most High and you understand those, not from the perspective of a group of people who want to be you who are not, but you delve into it, you will arrive at the correct answer. Now, my grandfather and my father have a proverb that they always use, and they say, if you work a problem according to the rule, you will get the right answer. Well, our problem resides inside the scripture. So if we understand the construct and the verbiage and the elements that are in scripture by utilization of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, then you arrive at correct answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm very proud of the fact that we here at First Tabernacle Fellowship have come to this point of that kind of acumen and that kind of work that's helping us to get to a matter of truth. Now, you have to understand also, with truth, everybody is not going to agree with your truth, and I'm gonna, I have already said I have a verbiage that I use. One man's truth is another man's heresy. So, and I've been thinking about this quite heavily, and the question in my mind is, does it matter? Does it matter that an individual doesn't acquiesce to your truth? Does it matter whether or not somebody believes the way you believe? Because it gets back to the issue, every man has to give an account for himself.
Right.
And while it is that we would appreciate and like for people to understand the narrative of the truth that we're espousing from Scripture, it would be good, but it's like anything else. One man's truth is another man's heresy. I mean, people have the right to believe what they believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the thing that I'm getting around to, at this point in life, is I'm no longer wanting to expend the energy to convince anybody, because that's not what the prophets did. The prophets weren't there to convince Israel that they had sinned and that the Most High was upset with them, and that the circumstances that they were in was because of their abdication of the Most High and their abdication of the Mishra. They weren't there to convince them of that. They were there to tell them, this is what you did, this is how the Most High feels about it, this is what's going to happen to you, this is how you can correct it. If you don't correct it, these are the circumstances and situations you're going to face with. That's what the prophets did, and they left it with Israel, and they went on about their business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think everybody within Hebrew Israel has, to piggyback on what you're saying, has to have an accountability of knowing what the mitzvot are. And because they came back to Hebrew Israel and said, this is what you guys have violated. Again, they're not trying to convince them of anything, because you're accountable to those mitzvot. You're accountable to knowing what those are. We spend a lot of time trying to go over them and teach them, but at the same time, there's an accountability that everybody has to have. So when that word of truth comes to say this is the violation of it, we're not trying to convince you of anything. We're just telling you what the Most High said in text.
Yeah, I mean, this is not You know, I think I credit us as I listen to the things that we say and the things that we teach, and a majority of the things that we talk about is not our opinion.
Correct. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but anyway, we're here in the middle of the high holy days, the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah, which is a Feast of Trumpets,
Yeah. Yom Teruah.
Yom
Yep.
Teruah. I mean Yom Teruah, which is the Feast of Trumpets, and the
And Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, and then going into Sukkot
Sukkot,
following that is where we are right now on the calendar. And as we live, breathe, and speak and sit here tonight, this is where we are coming up on the Day of Atonement, which is going to come up this week, this next week.
Yeah, next week it'll be on, and there again, our Hebrew brethren that'll listen to us may disagree with us, but we have it calculated that it's going to come up on Monday.
Yeah, so we were talking about this calendar in our last podcast and kind of got sidetracked off into some other things. Let's come back to it.
Yep.
I'm going to repeat a few things that we have talked about previously, and that is that you brought up in the study of developing the calendar based upon scriptural texts and also the ancillary writings of our Hebrew people, of works that are written in Scripture. We have the book of Jasher or Yasher, which is spoken about in YHWH chapter 10 and verse 13,
Yep.
and in 2 Samuel chapter 1 and verse 18. This book of Yasher has a lot of information that corroborates the things that the Roman Catholic Church have canonized, and from which all Bibles, biblicals, Scripture is patterned after. Even the Hebrew readings, writings follow the canonized works of the Roman Catholic Church. The only difference between the two sets of works is if you have a scriptures that are Hebraic, they have probably just changed the names, added the name of Yahweh into the text, removed the name of God and Lord, added the name of Yahweh in the text, and given you the Hebrew names for the various individuals that are there. But as far as Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and the 66 books, the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, follow that canonized work.
Right.
So with that being the case, we have in it, as I said, in YHWH and 2 Samuel, the book of Yasher, and in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 14 and verse 29, we have the writings of the annals of the kings.
Yep.
So we have these external books that have a plethora of information in them that help us understand things. Now, one of the other things that we have to look at is that when we first came to becoming Hebraic, we followed the Ashkenazis in terms of understanding when the Sabbath began, and we were setting the Sabbath at sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday.
Right.
And we came to understand through text that that's not a correct time in which that the Sabbath begins. The Sabbath begins on the seventh day when the sun
comes up.
hits
Yep.
the horizon in the morning.
Yep.
So from Friday, whatever, in through the night is the night.
That's right.
And the day doesn't begin until the sun hits the horizon on the morning of the seventh, and that's when the Sabbath begins, and it ends on that sundown on the seventh day. Now, arriving at that comes out of an understanding that we read in Bereshit, when the Most High has created the days and what have you.
Yeah, and when I think you may be referring to Bereshit chapter number 1, verse 14, which talks about how the luminaries have been placed in the Hashemayim.
Okay, let's go. Can we go over there for a minute?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go
over there for a minute.
Bereshit chapter number 1, verse 14. I don't change my glasses here.
And as we look at that particular portion of work, getting to understand when the Sabbath begins, because understanding when the Sabbath begins changes a lot of things that you do or think that you can do or can't do. The Ashkenazis follow a liturgy where Friday evening, when the sun goes down, they light the candles and they go through a lot of things that are not scriptorial. They are the means and culture that they have established for. Now I'm going to put this in it's what they have established for Judaism.
Correct. Yeah.
What we're talking about is not Judaism. We're not in Judaism. We're in Hebraic scriptures and Hebraic understanding. Judaism follows the narrative of several writings that the Ashkenazis have, which is the Talmud, the Talmudic writings, and the various other writings that they have contrived around the Torah, and established that book as the book of what they call the fence around the Torah. We don't have a fence.
Right.
There's nothing in Scripture that the Most High needs us to protect. The things in Scripture that the Most High needs us to do is to talk about and elucidate and make and bring to the fore an understanding into the minds of His people the difference between that which is correct and that which is not correct. So as we look at, we're going to talk about these things. Let's look at Bereshit chapter 1, verse number 14.
Right. So in this particular chapter and verse, we see where the Most High, or at least it's, through our patriarch Moshe, is telling us what these luminaries are and what they have been assigned to. And it says, and El said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to divide the day from the night. So we're clear on what we're talking about, the day from the night.
The luminaries divide that.
The luminaries divide. It says,
now we know luminaries are the sun and the moon.
Sun and the moon. It says, let them be for signs, seasons, days, and years. And let them be for lights in the dome of the sky to give light to the earth. And that is how it was. 16. El made 2 great lights. The larger light to rule what?
The day.
So when it says on the something day, that's when we start the day. Is when light hits it, because that says the larger light is to rule the day.
So if there's no light, between sundown and the next morning, then we're not in a day.
We're not in a day. It says the smaller light to rule the night and the stars. El put them in the dome of the sky to give light to the earth and to rule over the day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And we know that the 2 divisions between light and day are evening and morning. There's a transition that's there. It says, and El saw that it was good. So there was evening and there was morning, a 4th day. And actually, I want to go to piggyback on that. I want to go back up to Bereshit chapter number 1, verse 1, in the very first piece. And add a little bit in here, a little bit of context in here. It says, in the beginning, it says, El created the heavens and the earth. Now, if you read that in the Hebrew, I'm going to get real nerdy here. In the Hebrew, it reads as such. If you can read Hebrew, it will say, Bereshit bahar Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. That's what that says. Now, there's a word that's in there, Elohim. If we look at the word Elohim, anybody that studies Hebrew will understand that is a plural word. And we get questions all the time saying, and I'm taking a side quest real quick. We get questions all the time about why does it say Elohim? Because that means multiplicity. That means like more than one. So why does it say Elohim there? In order to understand the Hebrew, you have to understand a little bit of grammatics. It says Elohim there because that word is a concerted abstract plural. That's what the word Elohim is. It's a concerted abstract plural. I'm going to give you an example of a concerted abstract plural. Sheep. That word can either be singular or plural. You don't know if it's singular or plural unless I put it in the context of a sentence. I have a sheep. How many sheep do I have? I have a sheep. I have one. That's one sheep.
Yes.
Or I have sheep.
Sheeps.
I have sheep.
You have sheep.
That
Oh,
mean,
oh,
I have
okay.
min, that means I have many
right.
sheep.
Okay, so I get it.
Yeah.
I have a sheep.
A sheep, or I have
sheep.
And you won't know
Yeah, I get it.
what that word actually is because it can be singular and plural at the same time. Here's another one. News. I read the news. That could mean I could read Fox News, I could read MSNBC, or I have news. Meaning I'm going to tell you something about something very specific.
I get it.
Singular.
I get it.
So when you have to look at that word, you look at the rest of the words that are in that sentence to figure out whether or not that's plural or singular. And when you look at the rest of the words that are in that sentence, they're all singular. So it's a concerted abstract plural that gives you an understanding that says, okay, I look at the context of what the sentence is. I understand that this word is actually could mean singular or plural, and it's actually singular. So there's nothing that we can come back and say that there were many gods that were doing it at the same time.
I get it.
You have to look at the grammatics of how Hebrew is written.
Now, see, now you've gone somewhere that the average person would not have a clue of understanding, and for which many people who have gone to seminary would not understand that. They have no clue about that. What you just said, they have no clue about.
And which is a shame because that's what you're supposed to be learning when you go there.
Yeah, they have no clue about that. And the reason why I know they have no clue about that is because if you have a discussion with them, they will have a discussion with you around the polarity of God.
Yep.
As opposed to the singularness of the Most High.
Right. You got to look at the grammatics. That's when it gets down to that level of detail to say, okay, what are we actually talking about here? And it's in line with what the Most High has always said, that what does it say in the prophets? It says, who was there in the beginning to create everything? Nobody but me.
Right.
So this is confirming that. But let's read the rest of it, what it says in Bereshit, chapter number 1. Actually, since I have it over here in the Tikkun, I'm going to just read it here. It says, in the beginning, El created the heavens and the earth. And when the earth was astonishingly empty, with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered over the surface of the waters, El said, let there be light. What was the first thing that the Most High made? Light.
Light.
And what rules the light? The sun rules the light. And there was light. Now, the sun doesn't get made until the 4th day. There's a whole nother teaching that's here about light. So how can you have light and there's no sun made yet? So there's another teaching that's deep that's in here. But I'm going here to say that there's light. Light is made. And then the luminary is put in the light in order to rule it. I'm only getting over here to tell you that light was made first, but I continue to keep reading. It said, Yah saw the light and it was good. And Yah separated between the light and the darkness. Yah called the light day, and to the darkness he called night.
So
and there was evening and there was morning one day. There should be no question in anybody's mind when the day begins. When you see light, you have to have light in order to begin the day. You don't begin the day when it gets dark. Okay? Where that came up from, I can only speculate where that came up from, and this is the reason why. Because we have certain mitzvot, like Yom Kippur that's getting ready to come up, that begin in the evening. We have certain mitzvot that says you are unclean until evening. So your new day would start, or when you become clean is when evening hits. I could maybe postulate how that came about, but if you're reading it verbatim from Bereshit chapter number 1, all the way 1 through 5, and then if you're going to verse 14 and reading down, it becomes very clear that the Most High has assigned the luminary of the sun to light, and that is the beginning of the day.
Right. So that by Scripture and by Hebrew text, we prove the issue of the beginning of Sabbath on the evening of Friday is in error.
Is in error, right.
And that's what the Ashkenazis do, and that's what the world seems to ascribe to, which is one of the reasons why when we talk about being Hebrew, the first thing they ask us, well, are you Jewish? No, we're not Jewish. We're not of that vein.
Yeah.
We're of the vein that is associated with the ethnicity of the people. The people, the eternal people that the Most High created out of the loins of Father Abraham were Hebrew. The ethnicity of Israel is Hebrew. The ethnicity of Israel is not Jewish.
Correct. Totally
and
correct.
so therefore our language is connected to our ethnicity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Please understand that. Please understand that. And I make it a point to understand that because the worldview is that, you know, if you say anything and for which in this nation there I think I heard they had created a law or some kind of statute against speaking anything derogatory against the Jewish people as being anti-Semitic. But the problem being is by Scripture, they are not the Semitic people.
Correct.
Hebrew, the nation of Hebrew Israel, the eternal people out of the loins of Father Abraham are the Semitic people and not any other group of people.
Right.
And I'm not being disparaging against any group of people. It's just that you're carrying a title and a name that doesn't belong to you.
Right.
And that can be proven by Scripture.
Yeah, I think you go over Bereshit chapter 10,
10, yeah.
10 somewhere
Yeah,
in there, and
yeah.
you can get that liturgy. But I think it's a good way to set up the fact that when you're talking about a Hebrew calendar and you're establishing days and all these particular things, that is why I'm glad that you opened up with what we started with. And we spent a lot of time in our last podcast to try to prep people to understand that what you've been handed in that Bible is only a portion of your Hebrew scriptures in a kind of truncated sense. They've been compiled and given to you by a group of people that are not Hebraic.
Yes.
And therefore, you should be able, based on even what's in the text, because they reference other books, to be able to go out and look at all of your Hebrew texts in order to disseminate something. So in doing so with the calendar, that's the license that it gives us. Now, people are going to have two kinds of positions. I'm going to run with this for a little bit. Cool?
Go.
People are going to have two kinds of positions with this. You got to understand whether or not we are on and if you acquiesce to that idea to say, yes, I agree, that's canonized by the Roman Catholic Church, and that's not all of our Hebraic text. Yes, I can go ahead and look at all information and disseminate it. If we're all on good ground there, then what we will find that at what we call the auxiliary books, but I'm calling them our Hebraic text in totality, allows us to have more insight into the detail of how our calendar is put together. What's in the canonized Bible does not give you enough information to order to give you a good sense of what the Hebraic calendar is. We have to also agree that there is a Hebraic calendar. And I don't know any Hebrew that wouldn't agree with that, because if you go to Vayikra chapter number 23, it gives you all the times at which stuff is supposed to start. On the first month, on the 14th day is Pesach. On the 15th day is Feast of Matzah. On the 7th month, on the first day is Yom Teruah. So you have to establish a calendar as to when these things are going to be happening, because the Most High tells us on specific days you're going to be doing these specific things. I'm going to be near to you on these specific days. So with that, we have to understand that there's two schools of thought. Two schools of thought. One school of thought is the calendar is a lunar or a lunar calendar, or the calendar is a solar calendar. All of the Hebraic writings, when you look at them in totality, weigh more towards a solar calendar than they do a lunar calendar. One of the things that, and I'm not even using the Hebrew text, not even using it. Let's just say that we just threw the Hebrew text out and we didn't use it. And we just used pure science. We know that a lunar year is 354 days. Now, this is the reason why there's a disparity on those who are on a lunar calendar versus us that are on a solar calendar. For those of us that were on the lunar calendar, you probably celebrated Yom Teruah on September 5th. We celebrated it on the 15th, or whatever day that was, or whatever Shabbat that was.
Yeah, last Shabbat.
Yes. So in that regard, matter of fact, let me just grab it, the specific date. We celebrated it on the 14th.
Right.
So if you count from the 5th to the 14th, that is exactly 10 days. Now, in the book of Jubilees, chapter number 6, there is a verse in there that reads as such. Verse 32. It says, "And command thou children of Israel that they should observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days, and these will constitute a complete year. And they will not disturb the time from its days and from its feasts, and from everything it will fall out of them according to their testimony. And they will not leave out any day, nor disturb its feast." Right in verse 32, it gives us a specific. It says that you should be on a 364-day calendar. If you are on a lunar calendar, you are on a 354-day calendar. Why do I say that? Because from new moon to new moon is about 29 and a half days. Okay? If you do 29 and a half days all the way around, year round, you're going to come up with 354 days. You're going to be 10 days too short of a Hebraic year. Now, this goes on to say, if I continue on, let me just read all the way down through 38. I'm going to take a second here. It says in 33, picking up at 33, it says, "But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, they will disturb their seasons, and years will be dislodged from their order." Meaning, if you're on a lunar calendar, you're going to be coming in 10 days too short. Run 354 days back to back, back to back, back to back. By the time you get, matter of fact, there's a calculation that's done. And let me read it to you real quick. It says, in the Hebrew lunar calendar is contained 12 months and 30 days, which is also customary period for mourning. Yet the actual lunar cycle is about 29 and a half days, which results in a year of being 354 and a half days. Keeping the lunar calendar coordinated with the seasons of the year required adding a 13th month to the lunar calendar 7 out of every 19 years. So 7 out of every 19 years, if you are on a lunar calendar, you're going to be adding a 13th month in there to compensate for the time disparity in this 10 days, which the book of Jubilees warns us about. Going back to book of Jubilees, chapter number 6, verse 34. It says, "And the children of Israel will forget and not find the path of years, and they will forget their new months and seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the orders of the years. For I know, and from henceforth I will declare it to thee, and it is not from my own devising, for the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the divisions of the days are ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles after their error and after their ignorance. Verse 36 is very pivotal. It says, for there will be those who would assuredly make observations of the moon and how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. 37, it says, for this reason, the years will come upon them, and they will disturb them in their order and make them an abominable day, the day of a testimony, and the unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days with the set apart and the unclean day with the set apart. For they will go wrong as for their months and their Sabbaths and their feasts and their jubilees. Last verse. It says in 38, it says, for this reason I command and testify to you that you must testify to them. For after your death, the children will disturb them, and that they will not make their year 364 days. And for this reason, they will go wrong to the new months and their seasons and their Sabbaths and their festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood, which is all kinds of flesh. So in basically what I'm trying to read to you in chapter number 6 of the book of Jubilees, from verse 32 all the way down to 38, is establishing clearly that your year is 364 days, period, which is a solar calendar. Now, in order to do some more forensics about this, you say, okay, you just proved to me it's 364 days. I get it. All right. Now, we got to deal with how we devise, because a year is subdivided into 12 months.
Right.
So we have to know how many days are in a month, and we need to know when to start our year. Now, this is the funny thing about the Catholics. Let's talk about when the year starts. This is the funny thing about the Catholics. Is because the Catholics, in your Gregorian calendar that we use every day, January, March, February, March, April, June, May, June, July, August.
Yeah.
All of those months are, if you look at them, have pagan names, and some of them pay homage to Caesar, Julius, July, yes, Augustus, August. Yes. And then you get into the months that actually talk about numbers.
Which they call the Messiah.
Which they call the Messiah, right?
In history.
Right. You get into this issue of, okay, September, October, November, December, 7, 8, October, because you're looking at the prefix of the word, October, which is octo, 8.
Yeah.
8, 9, November 8, 10, Deca is December. So if December is the 10th month, count 10 months backwards. Puts you in March, somewhere around March or April. That's when the beginning of the year starts. That coincides. That's what the Greeks actually and the Romans actually got it right. They put it right in front of your face, and you do it every single day. But you never think about it that way. You think of the beginning of the year as being in January. Why? Because the word January comes from this pagan word called Janus. And Janus is a god that has two faces. One looks to one year, and the other one looks to the year behind it.
Looks behind it, yes.
Right, so
yes,
that's why January is set up that way, because it's named after a pagan name named Janus. Now, when you look at that, you say, okay, why is it in January? Because that's when the Roman Catholic civil year started. And I can only give you some context in that to say, when does the school year start? School year starts in September.
Yes.
When does the NFL football season start? Does it start in January?
Starts in September.
It starts in September. So during the course of a year, different things start at different times. The reason our year starts in January is because of a Roman civil year. That's when it started. So we go back and we look at to say, okay, well, how can we prove that? Well, you got to go to the book of Enoch for some of that. But we also know that the Most High said that in the month of Aviv,
Right.
on the first month, on the 14th day,
right.
is going to be Pesach.
Right.
Aviv in Hebrew means spring.
Spring.
So if
And he says this should be the beginning of your year.
this would be the beginning of a year. If you go all the way back from December, 10 months back, what season is that?
Where are we? Are we in, that's in Exodus. Exodus 8, 12.
Oh, you want to hook up Pesach?
Yeah, it's in 12.
Okay, go ahead. If you got it.
Yeah. Yahweh spoke to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim. He said, "You are to begin your calendar with this month. It will be the first month of the year for you."
Right. So,
And that month is Aviv.
Aviv. So we know when to start our year, which is in the spring season. So now we just need to figure out what specific day the year starts on. How do we know that? Again, we have license to look at all Hebrew texts. Now, some of our Hebrew brethren may disagree with me on this one because you got to go to the book of Enoch for this one. And the book of Enoch is not an easy book to read. It is confusing as all get out. But there's some specific text in the book of Enoch that gives us an indication of this. If you go to the book of Enoch, chapter number 72, and you look at verse number 32, I'm going to say that one more time for the people in the back. And that's not y'all. I'm just saying for y'all that's listening. Verse 72, verse 32, it specifically states, on that day. Now, prior to this, let me give you some context. From verses 1 through 31, it is talking about how you subdivide all of your months. It tells you how many days are in each month. Enoch chapter number 72, verses 1 through 31 will tell you how many days are in each month. Okay? So, now, when you get down to 72, verses 32, it says something very specific. It says, on the day, the night decreases and amounts to 9 parts, and the day to 9 parts. What did that just say? When we have 9 parts a day and 9 parts a night, when the light is equal to the day to darkness, they're equal. That's what that's saying. And the night is equal to the day. It just specifically says it in the next stanza. It says, and the night is equal to the day. The year is exactly as it is days, 364. So, what does that tell us? It says that when the light, daytime, is equal to nighttime,
right,
that is going to be at the end and beginning of your year. Now, when does that happen? That happens twice a year. It happens at what we call an equilux, not an equinox. It happens at an equilux. It happens in the spring and it happens in the fall, where light and darkness are equal. We know where to place the beginning of the year because it's in the month of Aviv. The month of Aviv is in the spring.
in the spring.
So all we have to do is look up when the light is equal to darkness. And that's the day that you start your year. So we know when to pinpoint the start of the year. Prior to that, chapter number 72, verses 1 through 31 gives us how many days are in each month, which separates our seasons. Because in Bereshit chapter number 1, verse 14, it says that these luminaries in the sky are to mark our what? They're supposed to be a sign for us, and they're supposed to be seasons.
Right.
So we have all that spelled out for us.
Right.
So we know when we can start the year. We know how many days are in the actual year. We know how many days we have in the year, which is 364.
Right.
And so when we compile all that information, we can overlay this Hebraic calendar over the top of the Gregorian calendar and pinpoint when each individual one happens. And if you go back and you look at the year coming up, you will see that the end of this Hebraic calendar falls right in line with what's written in the book of Enoch. Every single year happens the same way. And so with that understanding, we can say, hey, listen, we've got a good enough set of precedent and information in our Hebraic writings that gives us a good foundation to say our Hebraic calendar is solar and it's not lunar. Now, I would challenge anybody who's on a lunar calendar to present information that is in detail that proves a lunar calendar. And I haven't found it. I'm not saying that it's not out there, but I'm saying with the information that's out there for us, it's solar. So therefore, and this is the other thing that's beautiful about this, is that when you look at the Most High's calendar, most of all of our Moedims fall on Shabbat.
On the Shabbat, right.
Pesach will be on a Friday. Feast of Matzah will start on a Shabbat.
On Shabbat. Mm-hmm.
Yom Teruah started on a Shabbat. Shavuot is on a Shabbat. The beginning of Sukkot is on a Shabbat. There's maybe one or two that fall out of that, which is one of them is Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur.
Another one that doesn't fall on a Shabbat is the beginning of is Pesach. Pesach is not on a Shabbat.
Right.
So and specificity to those, most of them, the Most High makes it very convenient for you to observe them because you're already observing the Shabbat. The other thing that the Most High makes very convenient is the change of your seasons happens on a Shabbat. It happens in the first month, 4th month, 7th month, and 10th month. All these things that I'm reading, you can find in the book of Jubilees, chapter number 6, or book of Enoch, chapter number 72. So with that, we're just trying to establish, hey, there's good precedent to establish this understanding.
One of the problems that we're confronted with is that I always ask people this question: who told you that? My phrase in "who told you that" is the fact that we have been raised by understanding that the auxiliary books are not inspired by the Most High. So therefore, the people who organized Scripture left them out. But once again, I'm going to ask the question, who told them that they weren't inspired?
Right.
And the other question is, you're following an understanding that has been given to you by a Eurocentric nation who are not you and does not have a clue concerning your culture, your habits, or your way of life.
Right.
Which is written in Scripture, but they don't know how to understand it and follow it because the mitzvot are involved in that, and they don't even understand and know what they are.
Right. And even in the sense of the translation that you're using, your translation that has been compiled by the Roman Catholic Church has been tampered with. Hebrews don't speak in "thou thus saith the King thou of the Lord" with thee, this, and thou in it. We don't speak in the Macbethian language.
In Macbethian language.
Right. So you can't say that your text, if you're reading the New Test, if you're reading the King James Version and the King James Version only, you cannot profess to say that that hasn't been tampered with. Absolutely, it's been tampered with.
Yes.
Because it's not written in a Macbethian language.
Right.
So there's things that we need to consider when we're trying to shoot holes in a foundation or a precedent that we're trying to set. We don't have access to the physical manuscript.
Right.
So we're doing the best we can with what we got. So at the end of the day, I think all things need to be considered. I want to actually go to one more chapter and verse here to prove something here. For those of you that are on this lunar calendar, and it comes from the mouth of our opulent king, Donald Trump. No. I wanted to see if you were still awake.
That's good, because if it's coming from the mouth, then that's misinformation.
In the book of Psalms, it specifically states, Psalms 104, verse 19. Psalms 104, verse 19. David writes, he says, "You made the moon," which is the word YHWH. Chodesh is not the word for moon. Chodesh is the word for month. So when it says Rosh Chodesh, that's new month, not new moon. It says, "You made the moon, YHWH, to mark the seasons, and the sun knows when to set. David is even saying, hey, listen, I recognize that the moon marks my seasons. It doesn't mark my months or the beginning of my months. And I would also
now let's understand something. seasons are not moedim. And see, a lot of people make seasons synonymous with moedims, and they're not synonymous with moedims. And I think that's where a great mix-up happens. When he talks about here, you made the moon to mark the seasons, he's talking about winter, summer, spring, and fall. Those are seasons.
Those are seasons.
Moedims are the seven or the feast days. There's a difference between the two. So if we're using Psalms as a means to mark seasons, and we're using the lunar system, then according to Scripture and according to the auxiliary books, it puts you 10 days off.
It puts you 10 days off. If you're strictly going by a lunar calendar to set up your months, you're going to be 10 days off.
Seasons and moedims are not the same.
Oh, not the same, yeah. And, again, it doesn't say that, obviously the moon has and the sun have their purpose, which is spelled out. It's to give light. And then here David is talking about, he acknowledges the fact that the moon marks the season. So it's not to say that we disregard the moon. The moon is there for its purpose. It's there for a sign. That's what it's there for. So is the sun. But again, I would challenge our brothers and sisters that are on a lunar system. Again, look at the practicality of it. If you're looking for the quote unquote sliver, which nowhere in text do I find where the Most High tells you to look at a phase of the moon. How do I know that the sliver is the new moon? Who said that the sliver is the new moon? How come the new moon is not the full moon? I don't believe that when the Most High made those two luminaries, he made a sliver and put that up there and said, that's the beginning. He put the whole entire.
Once again, that comes from Ashkenazism.
Right. So
the Ashkenazis have generated that, and if we're looking at that as such, then we're still in Ashkenazism and not in Scripture.
And not in Scripture. So if we take a look at where our ancestors were, tell me how you're going to figure out where if you're going off the sliver, what happens when it's super cloudy outside?
Yeah, you don't see it.
You don't see it. So our ancestors didn't have the advent of cell phones where they could call someplace where it was clear and say, did you see it?
Right.
It was something where they had to say, okay, if it's cloudy in Israel and you can't see it in those winter months, then you really don't know. So there's got to be something definitive to say when these months are actually happening. And what more definitive way to do that than by the sun? Because it's going to come up every single day.
Yeah.
And you count it.
Right.
So that's kind of our position. Like I said, there's two schools of thought. And to come back full circle, we can maybe, I'm going to use the term, I'm going to pull the term right out of your book. We can disagree.
Yeah.
But we don't need to be disagreeable.
Right.
And because you decide you want to make your house out of stucco,
right,
and I want to put wood siding on my house, it's still, the framework is still a house.
Still a house.
Okay?
Right.
And again, let's also keep this in perspective. These moedims and times that we are to observe are mitzvot that have a litany of things that are prescribed to them. They're at a specific time, at a specific place. A specific set of people are supposed to carry out a specific set of stuff
for which we're in exile and can't do them.
And
all.
we can't do that. So I call on what we said from Allen Iverson. This is just practice. And we're trying to do it the best way we can.
We can, right.
Yep. So when we get back in the land, it's all going to get, the record's going to get straight.
It's going to get straight.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So it's not, we're not trying to fight with anybody in our community. It's about a community, but this is our understanding.
Right.
That's all we're saying.
And, and I wanted to make that clear because, the vibrato of one person can have a great influence upon the minds of whoever's listening. I'm not interested in a vibrato. I'm interested in truth.
As we all are, yes.
You know, and that's one of the things that inspires Christianity is how well a person can speak. You know, and not understanding that many of our ancestors couldn't speak well. You know, but they spoke truth, and people listened to the truth that they had to offer. So that's what I wanted to share with you all in this podcast. There's a lot of information in there that we've shared with you, and I realize that there is amongst us this idea of not engaging in the books that have been left out as not being inspired. But then I'm going to ask the question, who told you they weren't inspired?
Right.
And then
what was
the
source.
purpose? What was the purpose that the Catholic Church left them out? If you read them well and you study them well, and you understand the agenda of the Catholic Church, then you'll understand why those books were left out.
Excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
And
wow.
I'm just going to give you a clue. They were left out because when you read the auxiliary books, they have no information that leads you to believe that Jesus Christ is ever going to be God.
That's right. That's right.
And that was their agenda.
That's the agenda. Excellent. Eloquently put.
Well, we're going to leave it right there tonight, and we're gonna leave you with a lot of information that you probably are shaking your head at and probably going in a fog to understand. But our calendar is a good calendar based off of Scripture and based off of the Hebraic writings, and we'll be celebrating our feast days, not our seasons, but our Moedim and feast days based upon what Scripture has given us to understand. So we celebrated Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, on this past Sabbath, which was the 14th, I believe it is.
14th, yeah.
And we'll be celebrating the Day of Atonement. Will begin on, I think it is Sunday evening.
We will celebrate it because it starts in the evening. Yeah, it starts in the evening on the Monday, the 23rd of September. It says, which is, so, okay, excuse me. Starts on Sunday. You're right.
Sunday
evening.
And it'll end on Monday evening.
Monday evening, yep.
According to the Hebrew calendar.
Yep. Even got a note there that says that.
Yeah. So that's where we are, people. This has been Moreh Robert B. Holman Jr. and
Moreh Shawn Appleton.
And this has been
Hebrews in Exile.
Shalom.